When you think of Lake County, Indiana, you think of Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, I changed my mind. I don't want to say that. I want to say this instead. Oh yes, Crown Point, Indiana. What a noble name for a city. Crown Point stands proudly on the flat-as-a-pancake borderlands of Indiana and Illinois, much like the dozens of Karens who proudly run the town's HOA Facebook groups. Growth is abundant here, as you'll clearly see from the naked eye, on a casual stroll through the crooked, chaotic, and horribly planned road network that's made up of former county roads that used to head nowhere. Today, Crown Point is like a reverse Oregon Trail. Instead of people heading west for gold, it's actually Illinoisans heading due east across the border for a break on property taxes. Sure, the grass might be greener here, but only because there's not really too many trees around here, because this all used to be farmland not that long ago, and what took the place was a jungle of vinyl siding subdivisions that are all full of white, boring colors. So yeah, the color green just pops out better over here than it does on the other side of the state line. Anyway, I have a fact for you, a factoid. Americans love to complain. Just remember that you heard it here first. Nowhere else, just here on the Chris Harden YouTube channel. Americans love to complain. That's right, they'll complain about anything and everything, even if it's what they truly want. And what Americans truly want is a single-family home that's not right next to someone else's home. Only so that they can complain about the depressing vibes of living in a suburb and having to drive everywhere, not being able to walk anywhere. But they love it anyway. This is what they prefer. That's why we have suburbs like Crown Point. And yes, Crown Point is a suburb of Chicago.
He had great credibility until he said that.
Fight me. Not only is Crown Point a suburb of Chicago, but it's also the county seat of Lake County, a county where the population center has bounced around more chaotically than the overall political climate has since 2016. That's right, nobody here knows what they're doing, but they're moving here anyway. Nobody knows where to build, how to connect the dots through a proper road network that makes up a larger metro area. The only thing they know how to do is add more lanes on 65. Basically, people are just moving here and hoping for the best, and yeah. Well, despite Lake County being home to both Gary and Hammond, two cities that have lost nearly 150,000 people since their peak populations in 1960, Lake County has actually seen population growth consistently since 2020, even though it hit a peak back in 1960 of 540,000. And the growth since 2020 has been very minimal. That's because the cities that are further south in the county, like Crown Point, Merrillville, Dyer, these cities down here have seen rapid growth in comparison to cities like Hammond and Gary that have seen rapid decline. While another state that shares the shore of Lake Michigan with Indiana is Illinois. The two states don't have much else in common, however, especially with how taxes are imposed. That being said, let's take a look at how much the property taxes are in Crown Point versus something nearby in Illinois, let's say Lansing. So for this, I found a house in Lansing that's valued around $250,000 compared to a townhouse in Crown Point that's valued around the same. In Crown Point, you'll end up paying about half the amount in property taxes than you'll end up paying in Lansing, which is only 10 to 15 miles away.
Goodbye.
That right there is a big reason as to why this cluster of southern Lake County suburbs have been growing so much over the last several decades. The tax gap has been here for a long time, and it doesn't seem like it'll be changing anytime soon. It's not just property taxes that are lower in Indiana, it's also all of these. Plus, Illinois has a bunch of regulations that they impose on their businesses and a higher minimum wage, which drives up the costs for business. At this point in the journey, I've talked to many people who live in areas along the Illinois and Indiana border that have mentioned how a business can save thousands of dollars, or depending on how big the business is, they could save millions of dollars by operating in Indiana versus in Illinois. However, Illinois is more ideal for someone to work in, so in Crown Point and a bunch of the neighboring communities, you'll find a bunch of people who live here in Indiana to save on taxes, but they work in Illinois to get paid more and to get more benefits, such as pensions and whatnot, so they try to get the best of both worlds, which is fine, it's smart to an extent, unless you have to drive ridiculously long to get to your job in Illinois.
Nope.
I mean, that would be pretty miserable. There's not the train connections here in Indiana that there is in Illinois, so you're likely going to have to drive. If you're in the medical field, however, you're in luck because the largest employers of Lake County are no longer the steel mills that line the Lake Michigan shoreline. Rather, it's the hospitals. U.S. Steel doesn't show up until 7th place, then it's a utility company in Merrillville in 8th place, but the rest of the top 10 employers in Lake County is made up of individual hospitals throughout the region. Otherwise, there's more jobs and higher paying jobs available in Illinois. The pros of moving to Indiana, however, seem to outweigh the cons because nothing has stopped people from moving here, obviously. I mean, every time you hear someone in Illinois complain about taxes, another house pops up around here, it seems. Well, enough of that. Let's check out downtown.
When you think of Lake County, Indiana, you think of Northwest Indiana. Well, I know what I think of, and I feel pretty safe in assuming that I know what most of you think of, which is Gary, Indiana. You think of factories, you think of steel mills, you think of the giant oil refinery that's in Whiting, you think of Hammond, you think of all that blue-collar, Rust Belt stuff, and you think of the crime in Gary. Well, what you don't think of is Crown Point, Indiana, which is the county seat of said county. That's right. And that's where I am right now. You also don't think of a really nice city that's full of wealth. You just don't. Well, that's Crown Point. This is the Lake County Courthouse. Very nice looking courthouse at that. Right in the middle of this town square, giving Crown Point this old, small town kind of feel. But it's a really nice one at that. There's a lot of restaurants and shops along this town square.
One thing that I know from living in Indiana for half of my life is that the state really loves 3 things. The number one thing is, and always will be, high school and college basketball. I mean, I've never seen so many 50 and 60-year-old dudes glorify really good high school basketball players the way that this state does. Like, these dudes will sit in the stands at one of Indiana's proud high school basketball gyms, worship a crossover step-back 3, and compare a high school sophomore to Reggie Miller on a regular basis.
What up, Reggie Miller?
The number 2 thing would be the Indy 500 that's held on Memorial Day weekend every year, but in all honesty, that really is a cool event. It's one of those things that you have to go there to realize just how cool of a thing it is, as watching it on TV can only do so much. But the third thing is that Indiana loves their courthouses. That's right, just about every county in Indiana has a historic, awesome-looking courthouse like the one that you'll see here in Crown Point. When looking at the population history, you'll see that a population boom came in the 1980s, and then more recently, just about every census since 1990, the city has grown by 7,000 people or so. And it'll probably continue like that for the next few decades, as there's still plenty of cornfields dotted throughout the city limits of Crown Point and the neighboring suburbs for home builders to just buy up and build new vinyl siding subdivisions. So at this point, it's not a matter of if that'll happen, it's more like a matter of when. On to the history now, as the first settler in Crown Point was a guy named Solon Robinson.
What up, Solon Robinson?
The first name of the place was actually Robinson's Prairie, although this 1840 map of Lake County has it labeled as Robinson's Lake. Or maybe it's named as Robinson's and the lake stands for Lake County Post Office. Hard to tell. Regardless, it was the first post office in all of Lake County. Well, fast forward to 1874 and you can see that the original town had already been developed. The railroad slicing through the middle is no longer there, and today parts of it have been turned into a pedestrian path. Over the years, Crown Point remained as a small town with a small town atmosphere until around 1960 when the population really started to take off. It was around that time when I-65 was built through the area, making it quicker to commute to areas further north. Since then, the population has only taken off, and it'll probably continue to do so until there's no more space left to build. At least, that's what I would think. Some other interesting things about Crown Point would be the marriage mill, which was a part of the courthouse. The courthouse was the location of a bunch of quickie, no-wait weddings, as there was no wait for a marriage license. Kind of like Las Vegas today. But states like Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky had 5-day waiting periods for people to get their marriage licenses, and people were just as impatient back then as they are today. Also, believe it or not, The laws that were imposed by those states were in place during the Prohibition era over the fear that couples were going to get married while drunk. So that being said, Crown Point became a hotspot for people to get married in the way that they damn well pleased, and there was not a damn thing that their home states could do about it because Indiana had essentially no marriage laws from 1915 to 1940. So yeah, take that, neighboring states to Indiana. There were several other towns throughout the state, of course, near the state boundaries, that served to be hotspots as well. Well, here in Crown Point, the list of notable names of people who were married here is actually quite impressive. Names such as Ronald Reagan, Muhammad Ali, and Rudolph Valentino. What up, Ronald Reagan? Muhammad Ali? Rudolph Valentino? There's other names too, but that would take a while to read them all off. The Marriage Mill in Crown Point also had a shop where one could buy wedding rings and wedding attire. Plus, couples didn't have to report their incomes, so the whole experience was really convenient. With Crown Point's close proximity to Chicago, the wedding scene in this town was huge. So huge that as many as 175,000 couples were married in Crown Point throughout its time being known as the Marriage Mill, which gave the town an extra $300,000 annually. Speaking of money, and lots of it, John Dillinger has some history in this town too. For those who don't know, Dillinger is one of the more infamous bank robbers in history. He was at the Lake County Jail in this town awaiting trial for the murder of an East Chicago police officer. That's right, during that event, Dillinger's gang robbed the first bank of East Chicago and then killed an officer. However, Dillinger managed to escape the jail on March 3, 1934, when he scared off the guards with a fake wooden gun that he handcrafted while in the jail. He was also able to use some shoe polish to make it look more real. One morning, Dillinger was doing some exercises on the second floor of the jail with 15 other inmates. Dillinger decided that he was done with it, showed his fake gun that he handcrafted, and pointed it at the officers. And how did the officers respond? Well, they raised their hands. Nobody was able to get the gun from him, and nobody looked closely enough at the gun to realize that it was fake. So Dillinger and another cellmate were able to escape the jail through the kitchen, where they then stole the sheriff's car and forced the garage mechanic to do the driving all the way to where they entered Chicago, where the car was then abandoned, and Dillinger was able to pick up another ride and head all the way to North Holstead Street in Chicago. Once they got there, Dillinger met up with his girlfriend, who helped him hide from the authorities. Once the authorities caught him a month later, they arrested both him and his girlfriend. Additionally, Dillinger's attorney assisted him by arranging a transfer of $3,500 to high-ranking officials in Lake County. The exchange was done at a saloon on Main Street in Crown Point, just a stone's throw away from the jail. Really quick, as if you're one of those who like to show up in the comment section and complain and say, "Oh, there's so much of Crown Point that you didn't show this part of town, you didn't show that part of town, you didn't show the dog park, you didn't show the library." Well, that's why I have a second video on Crown Point, and you can find it on my second channel called Chris Harden's Video Archives. The link will be down below once it's uploaded, so if you want to see more of what Crown Point looks like, you can check it out there. Also, do you want to show me your city or town? Maybe you live in a rural area. Do you want to show me your rural area? Send me a DM on one of my social media accounts. I'm always looking for more people to talk to so I can make better videos. Well, people, it is now that time. What did we learn in this video? We learned that you can't always trust a couple who got married in Crown Point, just like how you can't always trust a vinyl siding subdivision's HOA to make a rational point. But you can always trust Chris's livability score.
Education.
This is Crown Point High School, home of the Bulldogs. Academically, Crown Point performs great. What up, Spike Albright? U.S. News ranks it as the 29th best high school in all of Indiana. And collectively, students scored above the state average on the SAT exams in math, reading, and science. Education gets a 17 out of 20.
Crime.
Like a lot of suburban communities throughout the country that are seeing new housing getting built like no tomorrow, the crime rate here in Crown Point is almost unheard of. The violent crime rate is 49 for every 100,000 residents, while the property crime rate is 592 for every 100,000 residents. Crime gets a 20 out of 20.
Downtown.
I liked downtown Crown Point. It's quite nice, to say the least. Town square design, central courthouse that has a lot of historic value to it, plenty of shops and restaurants to walk around and check out. The worst thing about it would be the lack of connectivity to the downtown area from the sprawled out portions of the city. Downtown gets a 16 out of 20.
Economy.
If you work at one of the local hospitals, that's great. Otherwise, the economy is alright. I'd definitely say that it's better than average, but there are some issues. The median household income is above $95,000 per year, which is well above the national average. No, that's not one of the issues, but here's an issue. To my surprise, only 35% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher. Usually, wealthy areas have a higher rate than that, and having a higher rate than that will attract more jobs to come to your area. But if that's not there, then they're going to look elsewhere. They're going to look at other wealthier areas in suburban Chicago on the Illinois side, possibly the north side of Chicago, to set up their suburban offices rather than set up an office complex in Crown Point or in the area. Anyway, the best thing about the economy in Crown Point is that the majority of the people who have moved here from other places over the recent decades are people who either had money to begin with or they work somewhere else far away. Very far away. In fact, a 2023 survey done by Fox 59 out of Indianapolis showed that Crown Point had the fourth highest commute time out of all of the cities in the entire state, with an average of 27 minutes spent behind the wheel for workers coming out of Crown Point. What three Indiana cities were worse, you ask? Well, some of this town's neighbors. Portage was number 1, followed by Hobart, Lake Station, and then Crown Point. That shows that commuting and poor road planning isn't just the fault of Crown Point, rather it's the entire county. I guess Illinoisans are just that desperate to run away from the life-sucking taxes that their state imposes, and commute times, it's a fair trade-off for them. Economy gets a 14 out of 20.
Environment.
All green so far. Will we still be in the green? The answer is yes. There's not much to be concerned about with the air quality or the tap water from everything that I've seen. The city has historically been strictly residential with very few polluting industries. However, there might be some days if the wind is blowing in the right direction that Crown Point will have some low air quality days. Otherwise, not too much to be concerned about. Environment gets a 17 out of 20.
Recreation.
This is Indiana's strength, isn't it? Having things to do outdoors, mountain climbing, top-rated hiking trails and saltwater fishing, you name it. Yeah, actually, not at all. Crown Point has your standard collection of parks spread throughout the city along with a few golf courses, but that's about it. Scenery-wise, Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore is about a half hour away, but not too much else stands out in terms of recreational opportunities, so it gets a 5 out of 20.
History.
If it weren't for the Marriage Mill thing and the John Dillinger thing, there wouldn't be much to write home about here, but those things are really cool. I mean, you talk about some of the people who had their weddings in Crown Point. Ronald Reagan and his wife, Muhammad Ali and his wife. I had to say that carefully, otherwise it would have sounded like I was talking about Ronald Reagan marrying Muhammad Ali. Anyway, that's pretty wild. Yeah, history gets a 15 out of 20.
Amenities.
From what I could tell, there wasn't a major shopping area in town, which is really surprising. Broadway between 109th Avenue and Summit has the largest concentration of retail in the city by far and away, but it's highlighted by an Aldi and a Starbucks. Not a Target, not a Meijer, but an Aldi and a Starbucks. Obviously, downtown has a nice selection of shops and restaurants, which is always nicer than your suburban chains that are associated with these retail areas. And clearly there's plenty of grocery stores around. It's not like Crown Point is a food desert or anything, but I'm speaking for myself here. If I'm going to live in a sprawling suburban type of area, I'm going to want a bigger selection than what Crown Point offers. There is a rather massive shopping area in Merrillville that has just about everything, but it's the only spot in Lake County, retail-wise, where you can find just about everything. And depending on where you live in Crown Point, you either live close to that area in Merrillville or you don't. Amenities gets a 9 out of 20.
Cost of living.
The median home value in Crown Point is $272,000 at the time of me uploading this video, which is June 14th, 2025. So just remember that this number is always changing. But at the time of me making this video, that's over $25,000 below the national median home value of $303,000. So I would say that Crown Point is affordable. If you want some of the newer construction though, you're going to have to spend some money. I see a lot of $415K, $790K, and $800K on that map. And once again, most of the high-paying jobs are far, far away from Crown Point. But if you need something cheaper, there's plenty of more affordable options in town available. Cost of living gets a 19 out of 20. All in all, the Chris livability score for Crown Point, Indiana is 132 out of 180, tying it with Dearborn, Michigan as the best place to live out of all of the places that I've made videos on so far. So there you have it, Crown Point, Indiana. Come for the taxes, stay for the commute times. The city is growing, glowing, thanks to the hundreds of Illinoisans pouring in faster than the HOA violations. The historic courthouse is still standing after 140 years. The road network? Built for Hilljacks drinking Mountain Dew back when all of this was farmland, and the road network hasn't seen an upgrade since, but that's not stopping anyone. Nuh-uh. Crown Point will proudly keep growing for the next few decades. I mean, there's still plenty of cornfields left to turn into the next vinyl siding subdivision, so you can just expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. Well, to see what city ties with Crown Point on the Chris livability score, that being Dearborn, Michigan, you can click this video right here. Although, let's be real, you probably won't because most of you only click on the depressing content. Anyway, we'll see you in the next video. Peace.